find important resources, they make sure that their development is done with care to protect our environment and our economy.
Geologists are going to make the overall final interpretation, if you will, of the health of the earth and how to safely develop resources using all available information and technology for maximizing the development of resources, for protecting the environment.
Thoughtful guidance advances our critical infrastructure in a fault-prone state and makes the places we live and work efficient and safe.
A geologist can't stop the hurricane, but a geologist may be able to identify areas that could be more prone to mudslides afterwards, or maybe be able to identify areas that could be more prone to flooding. Geologists can come in and tell you, well, here's a fault zone. You probably shouldn't put a hospital on it.
Natural and man-made hazards affect every Californian. Crucial geological work, such as locating earthquake faults, identifies the areas subject to the highest risk and can minimize the danger to lives and livelihoods.
What I do is I make sure that the public doesn't drink gasoline. I make sure that we keep tanks from leaking, and when underground storage tanks have leaked, we make sure that we clean it up and we are protective of human health. That is our first and foremost goal.
Through expert knowledge, geologists minimize the financial burden on those that must rebuild. On August 1st, 1968, the Geologist Act was signed into law by Governor Ronald Reagan. In 2018, we celebrate 50 years of the crucial, qualified work performed by licensed geologists every day.
Geologists and geophysicists are crucial. Their work is vital in developing and preserving California's infrastructure, environment, and economy. I'm proud to present this bill and ask for an aye vote.
What geologists do has a significant impact on the public health, welfare, and safety.
You know, when you think about engineering bridges, or you think about cleaning up contamination in groundwater, you don't necessarily think about a geologist, but we have our hands in all of that.
The board licensing geologists to practice geology here in California means that our geologists are protective of the environment and on public health.
Whether it's environmental geology or engineering geology or hydrogeology, without a governing board, there wouldn't be any kind of protection to the public based on the practices that those geologists are performing.
Why has the California Board licensed geologists for the past 50 years? We do it for California.
All right. That was just a video that the board put together last year to explain to people why we license geologists. And as you can tell, it's written at a very public information type level, but it does kind of give you an introduction into the subject of licensing. In case you didn't get the message from the video, it's all about public safety. And that's why, and in reality, if you are working in the applied fields when you graduate, that's why you're employed, is public safety. So this is going to be a rather long and information-intense talk. I have a copy of the presentation which I gave to Sarah, so she has it if you want a copy of it. And then there's going to be a lot of acronyms and a lot of terms in there because that's just the nature of any industry. So up here, if you want it when you leave or if you want it now, there's a bunch of definitions that are helpful, along with a couple of business cards that you might find useful. And you do not have to wait till the end of this talk to ask a question. I'd much rather have you ask a question when you think of it than forget about it 20 minutes later when we get to the end of the PowerPoint slides. This talk is divided into two sections and we'll take a break in the middle. The first part of it is about licensing, about that need to regulate a profession for public safety. And then the second half is careers in licensing. How does being licensed affect your career? Along with some job search tips, because when I was in your shoes, I didn't know the first thing about looking for a job. And after many more years than I care to admit. I've done it a lot. I've been on the interviewing side. I've interviewed people. I've been on the side facing an interview panel. And I know that it can seem like a big mystery if you haven't done it a lot. So, also I wanted to point out that this, the AGI, the American Geosciences Institute, has a lot of really good information on their webpage. They have something called the Geoscience Online Learning Initiative, where they put together online webinars on a variety of topics. And their workforce series includes a couple of presentations on licensing. And here's the key with AGI. If you sign up for their live webinar, you have to pay for it. But they almost always post a recording afterwards. So, you know, I personally don't feel like dropping $225 on a webinar, you know, out of my own pocket. So very often I'll go and I'll look at the recorded webinar, and the only downside to that is you can't ask questions. So if you are preparing to look for a job and you're thinking of looking at an environmental firm or something, for example, and you want information on certain topics like monitoring wells, what you need to do, there may be an AGI webinar that you can review before you go out on your interview and kind of get an idea, do a little bit of self-education, and get some practical tips that, you know, you might be useful when somebody asks you a question. So there are 2 webinars on licensure up there. One is the ASBOG webinar. That's divided into 3 parts. The students, you only want to watch part 1. The rest of it is a bunch of stuff that's designed more for the professors. So the professors might want to watch all 3. And then this one is one that was done recently that's very specific to applying for a license or certificate in California. And it talks about the nitty-gritty details, you know. Make sure you sign the application, you know. don't spend $250 applying for something and not sign the application, that kind of thing. So anyway, these are all free, and they're things that you can do on your own to increase your own knowledge. So there are some important terms that you need to understand when it comes to licensing. But first off, how many people here have a driver's license? Why do you have a driver's license?
So you can drive legally.
Okay, exactly. Well, that's exactly what licensing is. Licensing is the government's permission for you to do something. So if you are going to practice geology in the state of California, you have to be licensed. And there's a whole definition of what public practice is, and it doesn't include academic research. And there's many types of jobs that do not require licensure. So I'm going to tell you that, because a lot of people say, oh, you always have to get licensed to have a good career. No, you don't, honestly. But licensure will give you options that you may not have. Yes, sir?
Is there reciprocity with other states?
No, there's no such thing as reciprocity in California. And I can get into that a little bit later. So you're going to hear a bunch of terms when people talk about licensure or certification when you get out into the work world. The older term for a licensed geologist is a registered geologist. And the reason why we got away from that terminology is that registration is simply the creation of a list. And in the old days, back in the late 60s, early 70s, the board used to actually publish a paper registry. And that's why they were called registered geologists. You'll also hear something called certification, and that's offered a lot by professional societies, like the American Institute of Professional Geologists, I think that's what they're called. They have a certified professional geologist category. It's actually a membership category. That is not licensure. They will try and tell you that it is, but it is not. So certification is simply the comparison of something to a standard. So with licensure, not only do you have registration, which is your actual license number, but you have the comparison of something to an established standard. And the difference with licensure is that it's required by law and that it has to be legally defensible. So with a professional society certification, many times, you know, they apply whatever rule they want. You know, oh, did you go out and, you know, are you one of our buddies or whatever it is. But licensure has to be very transparent and it has to be defensible in court. And again, the whole purpose of licensure is public health and safety. And many times geologists don't think that they have anything to do with public health and safety. And yet almost everything done by a geologist, whether it's resources or environmental or hydrogeology or engineering geology, there is a component of public safety or public benefit in all of that. Believe it or not, I found out that Nigeria has professional licensing, and it's legitimate. They have a legitimate licensure act, and the whole reason that they license geologists is because economic geology, that resources geology, is so incredibly important to the economy of the country that they wanted to make sure that the people that were doing it were qualified to do so. So again, not all careers require licensure. You could go work for the USGS and never need a license. But many careers do require licensure. It increases your credibility. It increases your career flexibility. And in most cases, there's financial incentives for getting licensed. When I got licensed, I walked into my boss's office with the letter and it got an immediate 30% raise. Immediate, like that day. So because you are taking on more responsibility, you are paid to do that. Now, this is a very colorful slide, and it may or may not make sense to you now, but at some point in the future, it will make sense to you. Every licensure program has three main components: education, experience, and a test of some kind. So if you go back to the example of a driver's license, and this may have changed because I went to high school a long time ago, you took driver's ed, and then you got experience behind the wheel with another licensed driver. Then you went down to DMV, and you hoped and prayed they didn't make you have to parallel park to pass the exam. So that's pretty much what professional licensing is about, whether you're a doctor, or whether you're a geologist, or an engineer, or an architect. It all has that same basic components. Now, for geology, the education is a qualifying degree, or, and there's two pathways, or 30 semester hours of qualifying geological sciences coursework, basically geology classes. 24 of those units have to be upper division. So if you want to know what upper division is, you just go to your college catalog, and usually it'll say right there, these courses in this numbered, I forget what it is here, like 300 and above or 100 and above, are considered upper division. And upper division courses are those that are basically advanced courses that require a prerequisite. So it's not the basic introductory stuff. Yes, sir?
Do all of them have to be taken in the state of California?
No, they can be taken anywhere in the world. We get licensing applications from all over. It's really interesting, actually. So once you get your education, for licensure, you have to get your work experience under either an appropriately licensed person or in a situation where you aren't required to be licensed. So for example, the most common situation is if you work for the federal government, the states can't impose licensing requirements on you. So if you go to work for the USGS doing qualifying geologic work, that will still count if you decide to get a professional geologist license later. Now the key thing to remember is that your work experience does not count until you satisfy the education requirements. These things have to be done in sequence. There are other professions like the engineers where they don't have to be done in sequence. They can get their education and their experience in any combination or pathway that they choose. But the way the geologist law was written and the regs are written, you have to have your education complete before even 1 hour of your work experience counts, and that's very important to keep in mind. So once you reach that point, you apply for your license, and if you're approved, you take the exams. Once you pass the exams, the computer automatically licenses you in a couple months when we get everything validated. Yes, sir?
You just said, I was wondering if it requires a BS degree.
Nope.
Just the 30
Just
units
the 30
of
semester hours.
upper division.
Yeah, 30 semester hours, 24 of which have to be upper division. And the reason for that is since 1968, every bachelor's program in the state of California has had a minimum of 30 semester hours, and that's what it's based on. So pretty much if you've got the geology courses and you don't have the piece of paper, we don't care if you have the piece of paper. We just care if you've got the knowledge. So it's kind of a pseudo experience based, but it's not really. You still have to have the education. So now you're going to see something up here called the GIT, and that stands for Geologist in Training. To get your geologist license, you have to take 2 national exams from the National Association of State Boards of Geology. It's called ASBOG. And basically, that's the nonprofit association of every state licensing board that has a geology license. And they write the national exams that are used across the country. So if you take the exams in Texas and you want to become licensed in California, those scores are still good. That's the closest thing we have to reciprocity, is we'll accept your ASBOG scores no matter where you took them, no matter where you took the exam. But in California, the ASBOG fundamentals exam, you can take that the minute you hit that 30 semester hours. So you can take it in your junior or senior year of college. And that's really important because that test is designed to evaluate bachelor's level knowledge, the fundamental geologic principles you're learning in school. So if you take that exam, after we've evaluated your education to make sure you have that 30 semester hours, and you pass, you get a certificate that says you're a geologist in training. And that's a legally protected title. And we'll go over why that becomes important. It's totally voluntary. You don't have to do that step, but there are benefits to doing that. So recently, the board went through the effort. In fact, it took 4 years. We had just started it when I came here last time, in September 2015, to define what is meant by a degree and to define the minimum number of courses that have to be included in that 30 semester hours. And there's various reasons why the board decided to do this. Mostly, they should have done it 50 years ago. But until about the early 90s, I believe, most programs were very similar. And there has been a proliferation of multidisciplinary degrees, and there's been budget cutbacks at the universities. And so it meant that when we got an application from somebody, you couldn't count that a Bachelor of Science always had these things, or a Bachelor of Arts always had these things. And so we kind of did it a little bit just to make it clear that for the purposes of licensure only, this is what's required. So it defines degree as a program level accredited degree. And that's something that's really weird for most geologists to understand. In fact, let's see if I have it. Yeah. So I'll go back to the other slide in a second. And this is a screenshot of the Cal State Sacramento webpage on accreditation. And there's different types of accreditation. Every reputable university in the state has what's called institutional level accreditation, accreditation of the entire school. So CSU Chico has the accreditation by Western states. But individual programs, and there's a whole list of them if you go onto the Sac State webpage. I didn't have a chance to look at Chico's to see if they have something similar, where the individual departments or programs can get accredited in their discipline. And traditionally, geology departments have not done this. Other departments like nursing or music or engineering, it's pretty standard. But for geologists, this is very new. So for the first of the available pathways, we defined a degree as a program level accredited degree for geology. And I will tell you that 99.8% of the applications I get will not have this. There's one program in the country that has program level accreditation. So why did we do this? Well, we had to define a degree, and we couldn't define a degree by classes because the board is not authorized to set curriculum. So if we described the curriculum, we would be basically telling the schools what they had to offer in a degree. So we couldn't do that. But what we could do is say that if you have an ABET accredited degree from the one school in the country that does it, that's all I need to know. I don't need to look at your transcripts. It's a shortcut for me. What most people will do is they'll get their license under the 30 semester hours, 24 of which have to be upper division. And this list adds up, I believe, to like 15 hours of that 30. So everybody who gets licensed in California, starting tomorrow, actually not starting tomorrow, starting November 5th, the regulation goes into effect tomorrow. But our application cycle, we're in the middle of an application cycle, so we are not implementing this until November 5th, when the new application cycle begins. We'll have to have these 4 classes. No, and there is a description of what each of these classes are. There's no wiggle room. Once it's in reg, there's no wiggle room. Yes?
My question was earth materials. I've never even heard of that.
A lot of schools, a lot of schools
What
teach
is
it
it?
as an
Minlet.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's Minlit. Okay.
mineralogy, petrology.
Right.
There is a paragraph-long description of each of these classes in the regulation. And your professors do have a copy of this regulation. They've been informed throughout the process. But it's also on our website, and I can send it to you if you care to. I just didn't feel like printing out a whole bunch of copies of a 20-page regulation. It just seemed wasteful. Yes, sir?
And when you get an out-of-state application, that
They will have to have the same classes. That list.
that list.
That list, exactly. Everybody, that's the difference between licensure and a professional society certification. Everybody has to meet the same exact criteria.
Well, it's like mineralogy and petrology and statistics and sedimentation as 4 separate classes.
So you
And
should
so-
easily meet the minimum requirement for 4 semester hours. It
but
doesn't have
someone
to be
in
one
your
class.
organization is required to look at my transcript and the classes and like the descriptions of the classes I've taken to see if
Exactly. That's my job.
uh,
So, and most of the time it's pretty standard. Most of the time it's pretty easy. And what's really nice about the internet is I can get online and look at every single course catalog in the entire country and look at, all the back years if I want, because everything's available online right now. So it's really important that you look at these definitions, because like, for example, SEDSTRAT. Some schools teach 2 separate classes, some schools teach it as 1 class. It doesn't matter if you took it as 2 classes or if you took it as 1 class, as long as you have 4 units, whatever you took, that add up. So if it takes 4 different classes to add up to 4 units, it takes 4 different classes. Most of people, it'll take 1 class. But these knowledge, skills, and abilities are defined in the regulation. And so, same thing with upper division field coursework. Now, this does not necessarily mean summer field. A lot of schools are teaching upper division field in modules. Like a week here, 2 weeks here, whatever. Some people still take the traditional summer field, but a lot of schools are being a little bit creative because they recognize that a big chunk of time is often financially or personally not doable for people. So it doesn't matter to us whether it's summer field or whether it's these field modules, it just cannot be introductory. And it cannot be the field laboratory for another class. This is upper division independent field courses. So, and then you have to have 2 applied upper division electives in 2 of these subjects, totaling 6 semester hours. And it could be, again, for here we specified the units per topic or per class. Here, it's just a total. So you could have 1 unit of geomorph, 3 units of paleo, and 2 units of geophysics. Or you could have 3 and 3, or you could have whatever combination as long as you cover at least 2 of those topics. And each of these is defined in the regulation. We also tried to make it as flexible as possible by including technology applications. And what we mean by that are things like modeling. For example, a class on groundwater modeling. Or for people who are heavy into geophysics, maybe signal processing or something like that. And then applied geoscience courses from other departments. There are schools that lose a professor and can't backfill, so all of a sudden they're not teaching a soils class anymore. But maybe they send their students over to the civil engineering department to take that soils class. So we didn't want to penalize people who are at a school in that situation. So we've designed this to be as flexible as possible. And if you have any questions about it, I would suggest that you go on our website and look at the regulation under rulemaking or ask your professors. But it's very important that you understand what those are, because there's people out there who don't have field. And like I talked with a guy on the phone a couple days ago, and he's applying from out of state and he doesn't have field. And I said, well, get your application in by November 4th. Because on November 5th, if you don't have field, you don't pass go. Yeah.
So what about environmental science?
If they have 30 semester hours of qualifying coursework, then they qualify. And that was one thing, we get a lot of multidisciplinary degrees, like hydrology. A lot of those students have, you know, half a civil engineering degree and half a geology degree combined. And by making sure that they choose their courses carefully, then they can get licensed both as a geologist and in many cases as a civil engineer too. So it doesn't matter to us what the title of the degree is, it matters what classes you took. And here's an example that'll probably make people cringe. A guy with a Bachelor of Science in Physics and a Master's and PhD in Geological Sciences from University of Southern California did not qualify for licensure. They called his degree Geological Sciences. What he had was a climatology degree. He had no basic geology courses, not even a hydrogeology or a structure course. And he wanted to be an environmental consultant doing groundwater investigations. I'm like, dude, you do not have a geology degree. You have an earth science degree focused on climatology. All this atmospheric modeling, it was great. It was really cool. Smart dude, not a geology degree. So that's part of the reason why we had to do this, is because some of these terms have been used loosely and it causes confusion for people, which means that when I deny applications and have to go to court and I have to explain to the judge why I denied the application. And I haven't lost yet. So anyway, that's education. It's just to kind of get you thinking when you're planning your classes, because your pathway, if you're not sure whether or not you're going to go into applied geology or if you're going to go into more research-oriented, you might want to hedge your bets. Like I said, licensure is not required for every degree, every career, but if there's a possibility that you may need to get licensed at some point, then you might want to pay attention to that. Now there's 3 exams to get your actual license that you have to pass in California. The 2 ASBOG exams that we talked about earlier. This is your bachelor's level knowledge. It's 4 hours, 140 questions. Right now, both ASBOG exams are still Scantron, paper and pencil. They will eventually go to computer-based testing like all the other licensing exams. But because they're paper and pencil right now, they're only offered in one location. I think in the spring they're offered, I think in Southern California. In the fall, it's in Sacramento. It alternates back and forth. So the PG is designed to test things that you're doing every day if you were an applied geologist. Engineering geology, hydrogeology. It's based on surveys of the profession about what geologists say they're actually doing. And then the California specific exam is required by law. It tests things that are specific to California because there are actual published academic studies out there that say if you're a geologist and all you've ever seen is what I call boring geologic terrain, like maybe Florida, and you're just doing limestone and sinkholes all the time, that you're not quite as good a geologist as somebody who works, let's say, along a plate boundary where there's all kinds of interesting things going on. And so there is science behind the reason why California requires that. And it also is based on the types of laws and regulations we have in this state. It's not, oh, do you know what water board regulation does this, but it addresses the geologic component of that regulation. So back to the GIT. It is the certificate of achievement that you get for passing the FG. And it allows you to use a title. It's not offered in all states, but if you can get one of the licensing exams out of the way when you're still a student, you should do it. I can tell you that if you wait 7 or 8 years and take your licensing exams, and you take all 3, let's say you fail one of them, you're going to fail the FG. I mean, that's what the statistics show. You're going to forget the things that you aren't doing every day. And the reason you should bother with it is that when I talk to my friends who are still in consulting, or I talk to my friends at other government agencies that are doing hiring, and I ask them point blank, if you have 2 identical candidates, same GPA, same school, same work experience, everything identical, except one has a GIT and one doesn't, which one do you hire? Well, we hire the GIT. Why? Because that person has passed an exam. That gives me confidence that they have a minimum level of competency. It's like an additional QA, QC step for an employer.
I have a question.
Yeah.
It says understand the laws and regs. That's not something like we get in school.
Well,
so
basically it means you understand that in California and many other states, to engage in the public practice of geology, the practice of geology for others, you have to be licensed and you understand that.
Designed in very similar to like, you know, like I was a licensed contractor.
It's very similar.
And so we had one portion that was just the law. Yeah. In pertaining to employer-employee relations.
Yeah, no, that's a little bit different thing. This is strictly the technical aspects. So on the FG, basically what I tell people, if you're going to study for the fundamentals exam, take your Geo 101 book, look at the table of contents, and that's your study outline. Because your basic introductory geology course is a preview of what you're going to be doing for the next 4 years. And you need to look at that, use that as your outline and go, what do I know about this? And, you know, obviously more in depth than your freshman geology class, but it's a nice outline to help you understand. Yes, sir?
What is the relationship between the number of people that take the exam in California and the number of job opportunities in California in the same year?
I don't have that data. AGI might. AGI does track workforce issues, and they have a lot of published data on workforce issues. Licensing is not about whether or not you become employed. Licensing is strictly the government's duty to protect its citizens.
That's from the government's perspective, but
right, but again, we are not a professional society, so I would suggest that you ask those questions about from a professional society, somebody like AEG, AIPG, they may have that data. So this graph, even though it's not real great, there are statistics that show that the longer you've been out of school, the harder it is for you to pass the ASBOG fundamentals exam. So if you've only been out of school, I think purple is 2013 to 2016, the pass rate's about 68%. And that's been holding pretty steady. If you have an advanced degree, the pass rate's 85%. But as you go back in time, there's a definite drop-off. So if you got your degree before 2005, your chances of passing are 50%. So it really is important to take that exam as soon as you can if you choose to. And for those of you who might have that 30 semester hours right now in California, they're not charging an application fee. They're only charging you the exam fee. And I'm not going to get into the details of why, because it involves laws and stuff, but basically right now there's like an application fee holiday for the GIT. If you had done it last year, it would have cost you $400, $250 application fee and $150 exam fee. So I don't know how long this holiday is going to last. It'll probably last until we get our new regulation through, adopting the higher fees. But if you're even close, you might save yourself some money. There's a lot of information on the ASBOG website about what is on the GIT exam, the FG exam. It'll tell you that 13% of the questions are going to be on surface processes. 12% said strat and paleo. So it'll give you that kind of information. And also there's, on the ASBOG website, there's a whole list of study information. The candidate handbook has sample questions. Some of the professional societies know, mostly what I find is that the people who study in a group, if they get together with their buddies, they tend to do better. And that's just on what people report back to me. Because, you know, if Joe is really strong in one subject, Susan might be strong in another subject, and they can help each other out. Any questions about the GIT or the PG?
I have one question. It's scheduled for, you know, like we have to apply if we want to take it,
Right.
like in March,
Right.
by October something.
By November 4th.
Okay, so by November 4th, some of this stuff, there are a number of us would be in class.
Right, and that's fine.
Already in class, taking the units but haven't gone all the way through.
Right, because you're in the fall semester, right? So what you
Right.
do is you apply and you submit the transcripts, and what it'll show is for fall 2019, whatever, let's say it's structure, if you're taking structure, it'll show in progress. And that's fine, because by the time I look at it, I won't look at it until probably December, when they start giving them to me. Then I'll just call you up and say, hey, shoot me a new transcript. So.
And the new transcript might show, you know, like spring is taking paleontology.
Well, I mean, if you're going to apply to take the exam in March, and you apply by the deadline, if you have in-progress classes on your transcript, that'll be finished by December, January, we'll accept that. But we're not going to accept something that you're taking in the spring, because it won't even show up on your transcript when you apply. So it has to be in progress. It can't be in the future. It has to be in progress. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right, this lady here, her name is Adrienne. She's a graduate of CSU Chico. She's probably the best field logger I've ever seen in my life. And she is actually the last person that I provided a reference for before I got this job, because now I can't, because if I look at my own reference, that would be really unprofessional. But the reason why I like using Adrienne is she's one of the best geologists I know. She has a terrible test-taking phobia, absolutely almost paralyzing. She's taken the exams one at a time. First time she tried to take all three, failed all three. She was in tears. Second time, she took the fundamentals, passed. Then she took the practice and passed. And she's still trying to psych herself up to take that last exam. So keep in mind that you can be the best person in the world and still find this process very, very intimidating. And that's normal. Don't freak out if you sign up to take one of the exams, you apply, you get approved, and you don't pass the first time. That's very common. It doesn't mean you're not a good geologist. It means that maybe you're not a good test taker. Maybe, you know, you were having an off day. But I always like to point that out, because there are a lot of people who freak out about these types of exams. And yes, they're important, but they shouldn't crush your spirit, okay? Just want to make that very clear. So you've got a degree. How do you start your job search? Well, this is what you think your career path's going to be, and this is what it's really going to look like. And this is why I really emphasize at least getting your GIT, even if you don't think you're going to get licensed in a couple of years. Because, like I said, that fundamentals exam is the hardest one to pass for most people, because they forget stuff. And, you know, you'll have it on your resume, and it doesn't expire. I went to a mining college originally. When I went to school, I thought I was going to be a mining geologist, and I have never worked a day in mining in my life. I'm really envious when I go over to Division of Mine Reclamation, and they'll take me out on a mine tour every once in a while because they feel sorry for me. Yeah, you never know. I wound up getting a job in environmental because when I graduated, there were no jobs in oil. There were no jobs in mining, and you just never know which way your career is going to go. So always hedge your bets. Any job experience is good experience. Any job experience. If you can work at McDonald's and go into a job interview and tell me what you learned from that job, then that's good job experience. A job at McDonald's will teach you, probably how to work for a boss that you hate or don't respect, how to interact with the public and talk to people and provide customer service, how to show up on time. So don't dismiss, don't think that you have to have a job or an internship. It's great if you do, but if you don't, think about what kind of jobs you have had and what skills are transferable. Even volunteer positions can be important, which is why I throw up the GSA, GeoCorps, because you could go volunteer. During the Schwarzenegger administration, I was on the layoff list with the state, so was my husband. So our plan was that if we both got laid off, we were going to sell the house, we were going to move to Hawaii, and we were going to volunteer at Volcanoes National Park. They have a dorm for their volunteers. So think about how cool that would look on your resume if you get accepted as a volunteer at Volcanoes National Park. And you know, now that Southwest is flying to Hawaii, the tickets are pretty cheap. So you know, just be creative and think of things that might be useful. This is kind of outdated, but I throw it in there anyway because the best advice I ever got from my dad is the day I graduated to order 20 copies of my transcript. Okay, I have a granddaughter who's graduating from high school this year, tells you how old I am, and I used my last set of transcripts to apply for this job. And the reason why that's so important is if you find out about a job on Thursday night and the deadline's Friday, pull your resume out, pull your transcripts out, drop it in a FedEx envelope, and you're done. Luck favors the prepared. Can't say that enough. Luck favors the prepared. Define your geographic search area. If you want to stay around Chico, there's going to be a limited pool of jobs. If you're willing to move to Sacramento or the Bay Area or Nevada or wherever it is, then you're going to increase the amount of jobs available exponentially. Get your basic resume done and reviewed. We'll go over that a little bit more in a second. Avoid cliches. I swear, if I see proactive on another resume, I'm going to barf. And then tailor your resume or application to the job if you have time. So like if you're applying for a job in environmental, kind of highlight the tasks or classes that you have learned where you might have learned something about environmental work. If you don't have time, just stick your basic resume in there, but try that. And consider writing a qualification statement. If you don't know what this is, Google it. It basically answers the question, why am I the most qualified person for this job? The first time I did it, it took me 4 hours. But the first question they asked me when I got into that job interview was, why are you the most qualified person for the job? Luck favors the prepared. Writing one, whether you need it or not, will help you organize your thoughts about what to tell people about yourself when you're interviewing for that job. And follow directions. This is very, very important. If they say to submit the application in 12-point Times New Roman font, do it. Because what they're going to do is if they see Calibri or Arial, they're just going to throw your application in the garbage because you can't follow directions.
It's a screen. It's a sieve.
It is. And then beware of social media pitfalls. Okay. When I worked for enforcement at the State Water Board, the first thing we did when we got a new case is we hopped on social media and looked for people. And we had a case where we recovered $2 million because at the time those people were billing the state for geologic and environmental work they did, they were in Bahamas posting to Instagram and Facebook. And so really, I mean, just keep in mind that as an interviewer or an employer, I'm human too. And if I hop on a public social media page, which is why you need to lock down your privacy settings, if it's public, I can see it. I can't make you give me your Facebook password or Instagram or whatever social media site you use. But if it's public and I see something on there, I mean, really, I don't want to see you dancing on the table with your underwear in your head. You come into the interview, and that's all that's going to be on my mind, you know? So think about that.
Yeah, no wonder they still have that underwear on.
I have a question about that. What if you don't do social media?
Great. That's even better.
I was just wondering if it might be detrimental because you don't have anything out there.
Well, you know, in this day and age, it's unrealistic to expect people not to have social media. You're unusual.
Yeah, I'll grant you that.
I mean, in my day, if I did something stupid, there was no record of it. If you do something stupid, it's all over the internet. So just keep that in mind. And remember that, you know, you may not want an employer to see something.
So no social media is a good thing.
So private sector careers, you can do search engines, you can do Career Center, you can do Monster and Indeed and all of those. But the places you're going to find out about the jobs are going to be at your local professional society meetings. If you can go to them, do go to them. AEG, CalGeo, GRAC, all of those are great. And for those of you who are working in either environmental or hydro or engineering geology, I encourage you to go to the multidisciplinary societies because those are going to be larger. And a lot of times the person hiring the geologist may not be another geologist, may be an engineer. And so you want to meet the person that's actually doing the hiring. If you're looking for a big company opportunity, like an oil company, and oil company jobs are great. They're one of the few employers that are almost guaranteed to give you tons of training. Go on there and look for the person who's in charge of the geology and call them up or email them. You have the advantage right now. If I called up the head of Chevron's Geoscience department, they'd tell me to go pound sand. If you tried to reach the head of the geology department at Chevron, they'll be like, oh, you want career advice? Sure, let me answer your questions, because everybody wants to help you, believe it or not, because everybody got help from somebody when they were at your stage of their career.
I don't think you can make that point strong enough.
Well, I mean, I talked to my brother-in-law who used to be the head of exploration for ARCO, and that's what he said. I said, what's your advice for breaking into oil? Or he's a geophysicist, and that's what he said. He said, email, call, find that person. And it's all about networking. And if you're unclear about networking, how many of you are familiar with the movie The Princess Bride? Okay, I couldn't put this in my presentation because it's probably copyrighted. But here is the guide to networking success. This is exactly what networking is. 1, 2, 3, 4, in a heartbeat, okay? You're looking to make a friend, okay? Hello, my name is, hey, I understand you do this kind of work. I'm looking to do this kind of work, blah, 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 blah. You can Google this, it's all over the internet. It's a common meme. But this is probably the best networking meme I've ever seen. So really, it doesn't have to be that difficult. It's really about introducing yourself and making friends. So here's just a couple of screenshots of different professional societies, and you'll notice they all have job boards. Many of them will review your resume for you. You could submit it. It used to be AWG did that. AGI has a nice job page. Go through and look at all these different sites and see how they can help you. Or if you do go to a local professional society, take your resume with you, buy somebody a beer, and have them look at it. And then they will help you. Everybody wants to help you because you're just starting out, and somebody helped them when they were just starting out. Now, I'm going to rush through this last part because I know we've only got another 7 minutes, basically. State jobs are a little different. State jobs is a 3-step process. You get on their website, you search for what's called an exam assessment. And basically, it's an online questionnaire. And it's different from the licensing exam, but basically it's an online /resume/questionnaire. And right now, each individual state department can offer their own geology exam. So they're all slightly different. So you get on there and you have your resume that you've prepared, and you look at their sample assessment on the website, and you print it out, and you answer all those questions, because some of those state agencies use those exact same questions once you start the actual exam. And basically, the whole purpose of this is to make sure that an English major isn't applying for a geology job. It's kind of like the first screening. And then you'll get a score, and that score is good for a year. So let's say you take the Cal EPA Department of Toxics geology exam, and you get a 68, and you think, oh crap, I'm never going to get a job with that. Go take the California Geological Survey exam. Get an 80 on that. Which one do you use when you apply for jobs anywhere throughout the state? You use the 80. So you can take multiple exams. They are going to be changing this to have it be one state exam for all geologists, but I don't know how long that's going to take. They're in the process of doing that. Again, follow directions. take multiple exams, take multiple qualifying exams. So for example, a geologist can get an environmental scientist job at the state because you're scientists, you're trained scientists. And in this department, you probably have taken some environmental classes that would also help. So take multiple assessments. The difference between the geology jobs at the state and the environmental scientist jobs at the state are the geologists get paid more. Why? Because geologists can be licensed and environmental scientists aren't. That may not be fair, that's just life. That's the way it is. And then for the state, the interviews are very structured. 3 people, probably the person you'll be working for, a person you'll be working with, and probably an admin or an HR person. All interviews will be the exact same questions, asked in the exact same way. If you see people standing there and not scribbling on the piece of paper, keep talking, because they know the answer they're looking for. And if you keep talking, maybe you'll hit on a keyword, and then you see them start scribbling, and you're like, oh, that's what they mean by that. And so understand that. And remember that the licensing laws do apply to state and local government jobs. State jobs, county jobs, water district jobs, all of those you're required to be licensed. And this is what the website looks like. It's pretty intuitive. They have some good explanation. If you get on it and you can't navigate it, take one of my business cards and call me. I will get online and walk you through it. I have never had anybody take me up on that because it is pretty easy. Federal jobs are very similar. They're not quite as strict on who can apply for what types of jobs. So you be creative in your searches. Search for geologists, search for environmental, search for engineering, search for whatever it is that could be connected to the type of job you want. If you don't know a term, look it up, because they'll know what the term means. And again, follow directions. If you fail to follow directions, that's the first screen. The applications for the feds are screened by non-technical HR people. So they're going to ask you to rank yourself. A, B, C, D. Now, I'm going to be very clear. I'm not telling you to lie. But be generous. If you think you're an A- or a B+, you're an A-. Because if that HR person is told to take only people who gave themselves the A and you gave yourself a B- because you're feeling insecure that day, you just screwed yourself out of an interview.
You have to go back to that guy with the sword.
And then you know, if they ask you about it in their interview, then you can explain, well, I was going back and forth trying to decide how to rank myself. Your goal is to get to the interview so you can talk to the people who are actually doing the hiring. Interviews are going to be 2 people, and it's likely to be by phone, because they don't want to know what you look like. They want to eliminate that implicit bias. And plus, they're too cheap to fly you out to wherever the job is. And then federal employees are exempt from state licensing requirements. Here's the website, again, very intuitive. And then really quick, since we're almost 3 minutes left, interview tips. Don't go out and spend a fortune on a brand new suit, okay? Go to Goodwill, find a nice, good quality used one. Be early or at least on time. If you're running late because of traffic, hey, you've got a cell phone, call them and let them know. Most people are very understanding. Be nice to everyone. And this is the really creepy part. The minute you pull into the parking lot, you are being watched. Just assume that, because they will talk to everybody that you encounter. They'll talk to the security guard at the front door. They'll talk to the receptionist. When I hired at Kleinfelder, I had a guy who I had to delay his interview by 15 minutes. I called the receptionist, said, I'm sorry, you know, my most important clients called. I need to answer their questions and make the guy wait. Did a great interview. I was all ready to hire him until I went out and talked to Denise. Denise said he was a real asshole to her. How dare you make me wait? Blah, 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 blah. So entitled and condescending. If you can't be nice to my receptionist, why should I trust you to be nice to my clients? Think about that. When I got this job, they interviewed everybody I talked to after I left. Every single person. It is expensive to hire people. If you're not going to get along with people in the office, then we don't want you, because it's really a pain to fire people. We can do it, but it is a pain. So keep that in mind. And then remember, if you got to the interview stage, breathe. They saw something in you. They saw something they wanted to know more about. It's your opportunity to introduce yourself to them. And they've all been on the other side. Last tips, prepare for tough interview questions, and they tend to go through cycles. The one I hate is, what are you going to be doing in 5 years? Okay? Think about why they're asking the question. They're asking, you know, do you have a plan? Are you willing to learn? Are you ambitious? That's what they're asking for there. If you're good at humor, you can make a joke out of it. I mean, which is what I usually do. I always say I'm going to be on a beach drinking a Mai Tai because I won the lottery. But, you know, I can get away with that. You maybe not so much. I don't know. Be ready for a writing test or a problem to solve. A lot of times they'll have you type out a letter just to make sure that you can have a basics of grammar. And then be honest. If you don't know something, they do. Tell them, hey, I don't know anything about that, but I'm willing to learn. I'm hoping you can teach me that. And know something about the company, the agency, or the job. One of my best friends is a senior supervising mechanic for the California Highway Patrol. The first time he interviewed with the Highway Patrol, he didn't call me, he didn't talk to me, he didn't ask for my advice. First question out of the gate, what is the mission of the California Highway Patrol? It's all over their website. He did not know. He did not get the job. The second time, he knew everything about his highway patrol, and he got the job. So really, I mean, at least know the basics, surf the website, understand what the company or agency does, and then most importantly, say thank you. And email is totally acceptable for that. And the reason you want to do that is because every job, you pick the top 3 people. At least every time I've hired anybody, both private sector and public sector, you pick the top 3 people. Any one of those people can do the job. Then it's just a matter of who's going to fit with our company or who's going to fit in our unit. For example, we hired a geologist when I was at Cal EPA for a job working on a site, and the senior geologist who handled our database stuff was curmudgeonly, to put it nicely. He was a real pain in the neck or somewhere farther south. And we picked the person that we thought could tolerate him. That we thought wasn't going to up and quit if that person insulted them. So in many ways, the people who didn't get the job were spared. They didn't have to deal with this person. So understand that just because you didn't get the job doesn't mean that you weren't one of those top 3 candidates. And if you say thank you, next time I go in to interview, I'm going to pull out that thank you note and I'm going to call you up and go, hey, I've got another job opportunity. Would you like to apply? And maybe you're the only person I interview because I know who you are already. And that work, I've seen examples of that day in and day out. So if you have any questions about GIT, PG, or jobs, I'm going to hang around for a while. Take my card, you can email me. I do respond to emails. I don't have a secretary. I do have my own phone. I will call you back if you have questions, and I'll help you out as best I can. So, yes, sir.
I'd just like to say that I found myself half my life doing what you did at Kleinfelder. I worked for a major geotechnical engineering firm. I did a lot of hiring. And the last 15 minutes of your talk was just spot on. No, it really was. I mean, you all just think about it. Kleinfelder and Davidson-Moore and Woodward-Clyde were the heart and soul of the geotechnical engineering business on the West Coast. And Cal Berkeley was where we got a lot of our geotechnical engineers and MIT. And they would send people over, students, just to meet us so we could meet them and they'd know us and one another. And what was the guy who ran that department?